One of the things that's so important about this room is your immense experience. The best practice in here would make this country healthier and make our health care system more sustainable. And our job, both in the public services, elected officials, and you, is to get the best practice out, replicate it, spread the word, get it moving. That's the critical information dialogue we need to make sure that a great program like SMILE, which has such a positive impact on the health of seniors, gets everybody in Canada should know it. Everybody should know it. And we'll do our work. So.
That engagement of your MPs is important, and to give you an example, a very concrete example of how it makes a difference, Dr. Carolyn Bennett, many of you would know, came to Nova Scotia, came to my riding about a year ago. We went to the Rawdon Health Clinic, and we met with some of the people there, the remarkable community clinic. That fed into a national policy process within our party with our leader that led to our national rural health care strategy and a policy that will be part of our platform in the next election. And in fact, the leader launched that down the road from the Rawdon Health Clinic at the Hants Shore Health Clinic in Kent Shore, Hants County, just up the road from downtown Cheveree. So the fact is, you really make a big difference when you engage your local member of parliament on these issues. And of course, it's very important to have a very engageable member of parliament. And Siobhan Cody is just one of those kinds of members of parliament.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. My name is Susan Strelioff. I'm the VP Eastern Region for VON, and that includes the beautiful Annapolis Valley, Jane. We've heard talk at various government levels by various parties about home and community care, and there have been funding commitments, but somehow the money seems to have gotten whittled away into more expensive parts of the health system. Are you prepared to consider safe envelopes of funding, committed funding to home and community care for Canada? We cannot deliver cost-efficient and care-effective care if we can't count on the funding.
That's a very good point. I think the thing I would observe about the family care plan that we put out there is that it is targeted directly and can only be spent by caregivers. That's the point. It comes through the Income Tax Act, and it comes through Compassionate Care EI. It goes direct to help family care. It's not a separate envelope of money that I could push, or that the federal government could push into, intensive care in hospitals. It can only go to help home care. And then the second point here is, as I said, when we go into negotiations with the provinces in 2014, we are committing to saying, we got to talk home care. We've got to integrate that into the Canada Health Act as one of the basic pillars of our system. Now that's a big lift. We've got to understand, all of us, and work together to understand what that means, what the specific policy ask of a federal government would be, and you need to work with the provinces and Nova Scotia so they come to the table understanding what that means. We come to the table understanding what that means. It has to mean dedicated envelopes of money going directly to home care, because I'm convinced that wise strategic investment in home care and in the services that you deliver is crucial to the sustainability of this system long term.
Good morning once again, Messrs. Bryce and Ignatieff. It's great to have you here. Rob Ireland with the National Board. You delivered a great cogent plan, a 5-step plan, and this question is probably a little bit bigger, although it's inclusive of VON. You're talking about courageous leadership, and I think that that's what we all need right now. And courageous leaders are recognizing the role of volunteerism in charitable organizations, and there's been a real movement in the UK and in the US, and the leadership there seems to be recognizing it. If given the chance to speak about it, what would courageous leadership to you look like within the embracing volunteerism, charitable organizations in delivering that kind of cost-effective health care?
I hope Scott can add a thought to this. I noticed that VON is an organization that has paid staff and fee-for-service staff, and then it leverages an incredible army of additional volunteers. It's a very, very insightful and important model for all of us. You know, my mom, before she got sick, did Meals on Wheels as a volunteer and loved it and got enormous return from it. And the irony was she turned out to be somebody who ended up needing Meals on Wheels, so someone delivered Meals on Wheels to her. And that's how it goes, and it's good. I think the policy question then is, how does the federal government incentivize and assist and help and support volunteerism in our society more broadly? And we're open to all kinds of suggestions. Some of this is an income tax question. How do we create the right incentives? How do we create the right charter of relationship between the federal government and volunteer organizations? And what I mean by that is sometimes the federal government can attach strings to volunteer organizations that make it more difficult for them to be courageous advocates. Don't want to shut that down. Want to have a relationship with volunteer organizations in which volunteer organizations can get up and say what the heck they want to say to the federal government, even if you're in receipt of funds. So that's an issue we have to get right, because it's a kind of free speech issue. And let me tell you, that's a live issue at the moment in a lot of volunteer organizations in other sectors. The final point I'd make is a kind of, and I'm not trying to skip out of the question, but raise it to another level, is I'm a liberal. And that means I believe in government. But I don't believe in big government. And the one thing I've learned as an MP is some of the most effective service delivery is done by volunteer organizations. The people who really make a difference out there are not on a government payroll. And that's a huge, you know, so of course I'm saying that to make you feel good, but I'm also trying to make a general point that a liberal, someone who believes in government, has to understand. We're in a new world here. The era of big federal programs where it's a bureaucrat who delivers it or a health bureaucrat who delivers it. We're out of here. We're in a new world in which we have to leverage the compassion, the savvy, the smarts of communities in a way that gets us the solutions we need for our common national objective, which is a sustainable, universally accessible, free at the point of service medical care system for all our citizens. And, you know, so we just have to work together and use the Income Tax Act, I think, in a smart and clever and creative way to leverage the tremendous capacity we find in the community. I don't know whether Scott wants to add something.
Just a concrete example of how the income tax system can be used to help with volunteers, in this case in rural communities. Many of us live in communities where volunteer fire protection, or actually fire protection comes from volunteers. In fact, in our communities in my riding, the medical first alert, the first response comes from volunteers who are people who are part of the fire department, who pay for their training out of their own pockets, who then spend time fundraising all the time to try to keep the fire departments going. So that is one example of something that is part of the backbone of rural Canada, small town, rural volunteer fire departments providing medical care, in fact. And we have proposed a $3,000 tax credit for volunteer firefighters and emergency service volunteers to help them do their jobs, to help them serve the rest of us. And they've told us they need it. We would do this as a government. The other thing, Michael, and I'm going to make up policy on the fly. You won't like this necessarily, but I think we got to do more to get young people volunteering and create a culture of volunteerism in Canada. And I would like to see a future government inspire and encourage more youth volunteerism through scholarships. I really would like to see us raise young Canadians with a real culture of public service and serving their neighbors and their communities and their country through volunteerism. I think scholarships are one important way that we can do that.